Today on CityCast Madison, we have a new Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, and her name is Judge Janet. Producer Dylan Brogan is here, and we are rounding up the election results. It's Wednesday, April 5th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. So we're rounding up the news, but it's definitely not Friday. It's your Wednesday news roundup, election edition. I'm joined by producer Dylan Brogan, and we've got highlights from Election Day. Dylan, how you doing?
We thought we might be in for a long night, but nope, it wasn't even 9 o'clock, and we knew that Judge Janet Protasewicz, the liberal-backed justice, or judge, now justice, she came out pretty handily, looking like 55% of the vote, which is a lot in tight Wisconsin.
Yeah, AP called it at 8:53, y'all. That was definitely earlier than we thought.
You know, the natural question is why, and
she won.
Well, yes, she won against the conservative-backed candidate, Dan Kelly. And just look at Dane County. I mean, that is what says it all here in Wisconsin lately. If you want to win statewide, you need a huge turnout in Dane County, and that is exactly what happened. Dane County probably, when all is said, is going to have more than a 60% turnout, which is crazy high for a spring election. And every cycle, it just seems like Dane County becomes more blue and cranks out more votes. I mean, I think it's going to be 50,000 more votes in Dane County than there was in the last Supreme Court race.
I was feeling the buzz. I know, and then tons of people voted early, but just like out and about at the polls, people were up and at 'em early.
How many texts did you get about this election?
I don't know, like 17.
I think I got 17 yesterday.
Yeah.
And they just kept coming and coming. It's like, did you vote? Are you sure you voted? Do you need somebody to call and remind you to vote? Like, What's your plan, Dylan? And it's like, all right, I get it.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. Maybe they heard you say you weren't going to vote. Dane County came out, but what about some of the other counties?
Sure. Well, the Republican stronghold counties are usually those suburban counties around Milwaukee. That's where Dan Kelly really needed to pull some big numbers. And he saw, compared to other judicial candidates, he saw his margin of victory shrink in that Dems have done a good job in these suburban counties of maybe they don't quite win them, but they get close.
It's close to unprecedented how much Democrats were taking from those WOW counties.
Yes, Washington, Ozaukee, and Waukesha counties. Well, for Republicans, it used to be wow.
Yeah, y'all, I'm up on the terms.
They used to be wow for Republicans in terms of winning statewide races. It's more like a meh now for them.
Mm-hmm.
Even kind of bellwether counties, she's getting margins that aren't just 1 or 2 points. They're 6 or 7. In a really tight battleground state like Wisconsin, that makes all the difference. We just look at western Wisconsin. You know, that pretty much all went for Judge Janet Protasewicz, and that's what Democrats need to win. They need to win big in Dane County. Milwaukee County, obviously, is a huge contributor to votes. And maybe a side story there we can talk into later. They're producing less votes than Dane County, which is unbelievable when you look at the population size. But kind of looking at a different map than we are traditionally used to in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw some tweets of folks being like, this, taking pictures of their polling place. They're like, the turnout is more than, this is almost like a national election, like almost like the fall. Like this is big booming sort of attention.
Yeah, so, a 2020 presidential primary, those usually are pretty big. We had about, a 56% turnout in Dane County. That's great for a spring election. Like I said earlier, that's going to be more than 60% in Dane County for this one. So this is kind of an unprecedented level of attention. And this seemed so much like a regular Democrat versus Republican race, even though it's technically nonpartisan. And Dan Kelly tried to say, hey, judicial races shouldn't get all partisan, but, he was flying around in a donor's private jet the last few days of the campaign, and that donor is a huge pro-life guy.
Judge Janet won, and it means that the liberal-oriented judges will be able to have a majority on the court ahead of the presidential election, next year's presidential election. Like, that was part of why we saw so much national attention, is just like, if election lawsuits come up, there might be some, this is a swing state. And that's why we heard everyone chiming in and sending their money and giving their love.
I'm glad you brought that up, Bianca, because there were several reasons why there was so much attention and why there was a lot of enthusiasm in this election, because Wisconsin politics might be forever changed by this election. Abortion is currently illegal in Wisconsin. That could change, and we already have a case brought by Attorney General Josh Kaul that is making its way through the courts right now that will almost for sure make it to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And because Judge Janet was elected, that seems to indicate that a 160, 70-year-old abortion ban is going to be booted.
Well, one of the things that she obviously got flack, certainly from her opponent, for is coming out and saying that her value is for reproductive rights for women, that women have a choice when it comes to an abortion, and that's pretty uncommon. So we know probably how she's going to come down on that if and when it comes.
I don't think it's going to be uncommon anymore. We kind of have seen judicial Supreme Court races go in this direction. They're just full-on partisan races now. And I mean, you can make an argument that, hey, they were already like that, and now at least the candidates are admitting it, right?
Yeah.
And her strategy was to be very open about these issues, and it seems to have made a big difference. And nobody seemed to care that she was talking about her values in this race. If anything, it seems to have driven up the turnout in places like Dane County and eaten away in traditional Republican strongholds that would normally, give judicial candidates a big boost on the conservative side.
Yeah, and I mean, you just brought up also, you're talking about the lawsuit that Attorney General Josh Kaul filed. Oral arguments are going to be heard by Dane County Circuit Court on May 4th. And this is something that Kaul put this lawsuit forward like way back when Dobbs v. Jackson, that court decision came down and it overturned Roe and the right to abortion. Like, it was a few days after that the lawsuit was put forward. It'll be appealed to the Supreme Court.
It almost certainly will. Our Democratic Attorney General believes this law is unconstitutional, believes it should be struck, and now, presumably because of this election, there's a 4-3 majority on the court that you'd think would side with the Democrat Attorney General. Gerrymandering, also huge. That's something that could also alter the state of politics in Wisconsin, and there might be a case going through that reaches the Wisconsin Supreme Court that also where this election is so influential, because now liberals have a 4-3 majority. So it's hard to overstate just how important this one election was. And I mean, you could tell. I mean, Democrats poured millions and millions and millions into it. So did Republicans, but Democrats spent a little more and seemed to have the momentum, and these results just totally prove it.
The money really poured in, and money is ads, money is, calls, it's all the attention and really making sure people get out to vote. And, you're talking about redistricting. That's another issue that Protasiewicz was open about her values there, and she had said publicly that she thinks that the maps as drawn are rigged.
100%. And yeah, no, not a secret that our legislative maps were drawn by partisan people to give a partisan advantage to one party. And that's how the elections have shaked out. But not when it comes to statewide elections. And Democrats now are 3 of 4 in these statewide judicial races. Obviously, Governor Evers just won in November. So, Wisconsin may be getting a little less purple, and this is certainly evidence of that. So maybe an indication that conservatives overturning Roe versus Wade has backfired a little bit in terms of just political support for Republicans generally. This is not the Scott Walker, Wisconsin of 10 years ago.
Well, clearly not. And, obviously, Dan Kelly was originally appointed to the court previously by Scott Walker.
Dan Kelly now has lost 2 Supreme Court races, right? He was appointed, he was on the court for a little while, and then he is now 0 for 2. So Predictions that he would be weak in this race completely came true, and the Wisconsin voters just were not going for it. And the whole shtick of him saying, I'm just going to call balls and strikes and my personal politics don't have to matter, I don't think people were buying that. There was another conservative back candidate in the primary, Jennifer Darrow, and she was from Waukesha, and it kind of made a name for herself with that big trial that she oversaw. And, would she have done better?
It's hard to say.
Who knows? But I think it does make a difference if it was two women on the ballot.
We also learned who our Madison mayor is. Closer to home, we reelected Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway to a second term, and pretty handily. Satya
Rhodes Conway has earned another term. And I actually think this race was closer than I thought it would be. Satya Rhodes Conway had a pretty remarkable primary victory in February, where it was all but like 2 wards out of 140 that she won in February.
The race changed, though.
I think Gloria Reyes really stepped it up in the last few weeks of her campaign. She was going after the mayor hard on a bunch of issues. She was having press conferences and having her surrogates get out there. And I mean, she definitely closed the gap. I mean, it ended up being about 55%, which is not as high as the victory that Satya had in her first term, but still a healthy win, but, not a landslide.
Yeah, what was the difference there again? And you're talking about Satya when she ran against former Mayor Paul Soglin.
So the first time she was elected in 2019, she was running against an incumbent mayor, Paul Soglin, right? And she got nearly 62% of the vote. And this time she won about 55% of the vote, and Gloria Reyes had about 45, a little less than that with write-ins. So Satya's solid win for sure. I mean, this race seemed to be all about her record and her vision for the city. And I think that there are people who disagree with the mayor on how ambitious she's being, particularly with transit issues, with zoning issues. And she's moving very fast, and I think was open to some real criticism. But Gloria Reyes, just not quite enough to come out on top. But I definitely say she was doing a lot better in the last weeks of the campaign in terms of, making this race competitive. It was looking like a blowout there for a while.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the main tensions that you kind of heard across the board, and the tension between getting things done and getting community input.
And just looking at where Satya won, I mean, if you just look at the wards, Gloria did a lot better in kind of the out. Like if you look at Madison, if you think of it as like a circle, she was winning some wards on the outside. Satya did pretty well in the isthmus and the interior of the city, the core of the city where there are a lot of votes. But it wasn't like the primary where the mayor was winning every single ward.
I will say something stood out to me when we talked with Gloria, which was, she really said that she wanted to run. Of course, she wanted to be mayor, but she also wanted to push some issues. And from her concession speech, she said, "I'm so proud of the campaign we ran and the issues we brought to the forefront of this election." And one of the things that she's talking about is we kind of, making sure that inclusivity is really talked about on a regular basis, thinking about the Race to Equity report, making sure that diversity and people of color, they're not left behind, knowing, how our city has struggles with outcomes for Black and brown folks. And I think that was one of her goals. And, I think that she did succeed in some degree of trying to bring that forward.
And I think Mayor Rhodes Conway would be very smart to think about that message, because it certainly resonated with a number of voters. And not a landslide. I mean, Satya Rhodes Conway did win by 10 points. She has a mandate, but I wouldn't say it's not like when Soglin won in 2015 with 72% of the vote. It's not that kind of mandate.
And outcome, BRT. We're going to get our fast buses, and conversations to continue. Dylan, we're going to talk more about this on Friday. We got
a lot to talk about on Friday. The council race is very interesting. We'll get to those later.
Yes. Thank you for helping me round up the big news. And hey, it's everyone, tomorrow's food day. So we'll be giving you a little break from election news. 2 words, cheesy bread. But don't worry, we'll be back on Friday with our usual roundup and analysis of the Madison City Council races, as Dylan shared, and more. So see you then. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell Dane County Clerk Scott McDonnell about us? He's definitely not busy today. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, democracy has spoken. You gotta cancel me. Just cancel me.